Twilight Princess was the first game that I followed before it was released. I was finally old enough to be truly cognizant about game releases. Up until this point, my only experiences with getting new video games was either having a parent come home with one or somehow noticing it on a store shelf. I first learned about the game while it was still being touted as The Wind Waker 2. By this point, I was a frequent visitor to many gaming websites, and this led to my first experience with the dreaded delay. I waited for this game for almost 4 years. It made my experiences waiting for Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker look paltry by comparison. I literally went from elementary school to my last year of junior high school in the time period from announcement to release. I still vividly remember following all the trailer releases. The first trailer showcased an adult-age Link battling hordes of enemies, as well as a Balrog-like creature. The second and third trailer showcased some of the plot details, most notably Link turning into a wolf. This was the first time I was able to ride on the waves of hype, and it was a great learning experience and patience. And boy, did it require a lot of patience. The delays took so long that Twilight Princess wound up being released on the Wii before it managed to hit the GameCube. This was also my first experience being overtly angry at a video game company. I had no money to buy a new console, and given the Wii shortages, it was not likely that I would have an opportunity to buy one anyway. So I had to wait an agonizing 2 weeks while also avoiding the internet. I finally got my GameCube copy though, and once again, fell in love with a Zelda game. Being on the cusp of high school, the older Link and the more adult story was a welcome change. By this point, I began to feel a little embarrassed about playing Wind Waker because it looked like a cartoon. I was pretty stupid back then. That first night of playing, I managed to beat the first dungeon before I had to go to bed. Considering how long the prologue is in retrospect, that is quite impressive. The wolf parts were annoying at first, but the return to an adult-aged Link was everything that I hoped for. The game was basically a sequel to the later part of Ocarina of Time. The game had everything that made Ocarina of Time great. Epona was back after an absence in Wind Waker, Hyrule Field was back, and most importantly, the tone was just as dark as the adult section in Ocarina. Twilight Princess also gave me my favorite moment in Zelda history, the mounted duel on top of the Bridge of Eldin. I still have a save file before that exact moment just so I can replay it whenever I want to. As a teenager, I was also surprised at how adult the story could be at times. Ocarina and Wind Waker were pretty basic in terms of story, but Twilight Princess had enough edge to it to placate my need for something more grown up. The story with the Twilight Realm and Ganondorf's execution made this into something that was more serious. It was like my actions during Ocarina of Time directly caused this change of story. With the official timeline out now, this hunch was correct at the time. To top it off, the main villain for the majority of the story was actually pretty creepy. To this day, Xant's pointed teeth still creep me out. Creepiness aside, the story was darker and actually fleshed out a bit more than usual, which made this my favorite Zelda game for a long time. So much so that I eventually bought the Wii version, and not one but 2 collectible strategy guides to add to my collection. As for the game itself, the dungeons stood out to me the most. The typical themes of fire, water, and forest were there, but were used to perfection. Interacting with the monkeys in the forest temple was entertaining, sumo wrestling the Goron in the fire temple was amazing, climbing onto the back of a gigantic eel underwater was as cinematic as Zelda got at that time. My personal favorite dungeon was the Snow Peak Ruins. It was literally an ice mansion that featured 2 lovable Yetis to assist you. You can't get more unique than that in Twilight Princess. Eventually, it was time to face off against Xant and save Hyrule. To my surprise, Ganondorf was revealed as the puppet master behind Xant's actions. I was initially dubious of the story implications, but this quickly fell by the wayside when the last boss battles began. Dueling Ganondorf will never cease to be epic. I literally managed to beat both versions of this game within the same month period, and finally got to finish the experience that I waited years for. It would be years until a new Zelda game would be released for the Wii, but I ended up playing through the entire series as I waited. I was finally able to revisit a game that I played long ago, but now could give it the love it deserved. Like always, thanks for checking this video out, and I'll be back soon with another part of my Zelda retrospective.